Ladies and gentlemen, here's something that will make you stop and think what happens when you go silent on a man. Now, I'm not talking about a moment of quiet or taking a little space. I'm talking about when you intentionally pull back, stop reaching out, and let your words disappear. If you've ever done it, you've probably noticed a shift. But what you might not know is that your silence speaks louder than you think. It's a game changer. It triggers reactions, emotions, and thoughts inside him that he might not even understand himself. So what does he really do when you go silent? Stay with me, because what I'm about to break down will leave you understanding how powerful your silence can be in ways you never thought possible. This is one of the most underestimated moves you can make, and by the end of this, you'll see just how much it can shake up the dynamic of your relationship. Keep watching, because this is the kind of insight you need to know. When a woman goes silent, the first thing a man feels is confusion. He doesn't know what happened or why the communication has suddenly stopped. Men are wired to understand the world through action and communication. When that communication vanishes, he feels like a piece of the puzzle is missing, and he's left trying to figure out what went wrong. You have to understand, men are used to women expressing themselves, talking through issues, or at least showing some sign that something is wrong. But when a woman goes silent, it's like a switch has been flipped, and it leaves him in a state of uncertainty. This confusion comes from the fact that men often take things literally. If you were previously communicative, affectionate, and open, your sudden silence raises a red flag. He might start asking himself, what did I do wrong? Or what happened between us? Silence can be perceived as a break in the emotional connection they thought they had. For a man, it's like trying to navigate in the dark. He doesn't know where to go or how to approach the situation. In this state of confusion, his first instinct might be to try to fill the gap by analyzing everything he did or didn't do in the relationship. Men are naturally problem solvers, and when something doesn't make sense, they want to fix it. They might replay every conversation, every text, and every moment spent with you, trying to find the point where things started to shift. This search for answers becomes all-consuming for him, especially if he doesn't know what's causing the silence. Men are emotionally intelligent in their own way, but they don't always pick up on subtle cues as quickly as women do. So when you go silent, it forces him into a position where he has to confront the fact that he doesn't understand the situation. What he's really trying to figure out is whether or not this silence means the end. In his mind, silence often equals withdrawal. If you're not talking to him, he may believe you're losing interest. He'll wonder if your feelings have changed, if you're no longer invested in the relationship, or if you've emotionally checked out. This thought can hit him hard, especially if he cares about you and values the connection. He'll start second-guessing the entire dynamic between the two of you, wondering whether he's been doing enough or if he's been doing the wrong things all along. He'll feel like he's walking on eggshells, not knowing how to bring up the subject without making things worse. At this point, confusion starts to morph into a deep desire for clarity. He doesn't want to sit in this emotional fog. He'll probably reach out to you, sending texts, making phone calls, or even showing up to try and get you to talk. His actions will be motivated by the need to understand what's going on. If you're still not engaging, this can push him further into frustration. He doesn't want to nag, but at the same time, he doesn't want to lose you, so he'll try to approach the situation cautiously. The more silence you give him, the more he'll attempt to find a way to break it, all while feeling a sense of anxiety building up inside. What makes things more complicated for him is that men often don't have the tools or emotional intelligence to process this silence in the healthiest way. Instead of confronting their emotions, they might push them down, telling themselves they're fine or trying to stay busy. However, the truth is that the silence lingers in his mind, making him question not only the relationship but also his self-worth. If you've pulled back without explanation, he might start to think that he did something unforgivable or that you're not as invested as he thought. This confusion can also lead to a kind of defensive posture. He might start to withdraw emotionally, even if he doesn't want to, because he's unsure of how to handle your silence. He might even act as if he's unaffected, but deep down he's hoping for some sign, some indication that everything will be okay. He wants to know that he hasn't lost you entirely. The longer the silence drags on, the more he will try to fill in the blanks with his own assumptions, some of which may be far from the truth. But here's the catch: his confusion, his frustration, and his need for answers can also be a reflection of his deeper feelings for you. When a man feels lost or uncertain about the relationship, it shows that he cares. His mind is racing because he doesn't want to lose you. If he didn't care, he wouldn't feel so desperate for answers. So when you go silent, it forces him to confront the emotional weight of the relationship in a way that words can't. His confusion might be uncomfortable for him, but it's also a sign of his investment. He needs to understand what's happening because he values what he has with you and doesn't want to lose it. In conclusion, when a woman goes silent, a man's confusion is one of the first reactions he experiences. It's not just a simple moment of wondering what happened. It's a deeper emotional response that shows how much he cares and wants to understand what's going on. Silence doesn't just leave him questioning the relationship. It forces him to question his own role in it, his actions, and his worth. And this confusion can lead him to make moves to get answers, whether that's through reaching out, overthinking, or attempting to fix things on his own. Silence speaks volumes, and to a man, it can be one of the most powerful tools. You have to make him realize just how much you matter. When a woman goes silent, it often leads a man to overthink everything. Men are naturally inclined to problem solve, but when faced with uncertainty and confusion caused by your silence, they don't always know where to begin. Overthinking becomes a natural response, and it's an instinctive way for him to try to make sense of the situation. He begins replaying every conversation, every action, and every moment spent with you. He'll start asking himself questions like, was there something I said that upset her? Or did I do something wrong that I didn't notice? He'll question the smallest details, convinced that the silence must be rooted in something he missed. What makes it more intense is the fact that when he doesn't know the cause of your silence, his mind starts to create possibilities, many of which may not even be true. He starts to imagine every worst-case scenario, leading to a spiral of uncertainty and anxiety. This overthinking is like a hamster wheel that never stops turning. He'll remember a disagreement that may have seemed minor at the time, but now feels like a potential turning point. He'll wonder if he said the wrong thing, made a joke that offended you, or forgot an important date or promise. His mind becomes fixated on every potential mistake he made, even if it was something small and unintentional. The silence amplifies every little doubt, making him question whether this is the end of something that once felt stable and secure. Men, in their effort to understand the issue, start overanalyzing their own actions, thinking that the key to solving the problem lies in understanding every minute detail of what they may have done wrong. But here's the thing, overthinking doesn't always lead to clarity. In fact, it often makes things more complicated. A man might even start questioning himself beyond just the relationship. He'll wonder if he's good enough, if he's capable of meeting your needs, or if he's the right person for you. His self-esteem may take a hit as he starts to doubt his worthiness. He could start feeling insecure about the relationship as a whole, wondering if your silence is a sign that you're no longer interested or that he's failed in some way. The more he overthinks, the more self-doubt creeps in. He may even start thinking that his best efforts aren't enough to keep your attention, which can be both frustrating and demoralizing. This overthinking can become a barrier to communication as well. The more a man replays the situation in his mind, the more convinced he becomes that he already knows the answer. He might think that you're upset with him, that you're no longer in love, or that you've already moved on. His perception of the situation becomes clouded by his own anxiety and doubts, which can prevent him from approaching you in a calm and rational way. Instead of addressing the issue directly, he might act impulsively, trying to fix the problem without fully understanding what's really going on. This can lead to frustration on both sides, as the real issue remains unresolved while both of you are caught in a cycle of miscommunication. But even as he overthinks, there's a part of him that knows deep down that something more is happening. He knows that your silence is probably not just about a single moment or action. He starts to realize that this could be a reflection of something deeper. Maybe it's about the dynamics of the relationship, or maybe it's a personal issue that you're facing. However, the uncertainty still eats away at him. He's trying to navigate through a fog, unable to see clearly enough to make any decisive moves. His attempts to find the truth only seem to make things more complicated as his emotions take over his logic. Sometimes this overthinking can lead to behavior that might not be the most effective. A man might start reaching out more, sending multiple texts, or trying to contact you through various means, hoping that the more he pushes for an answer, the sooner the silence will end. But the more he pushes, the more frustrated and overwhelmed he can feel when he doesn't get a response. The silence continues to grow, making him feel even more powerless. He wants to know what's going on, but without the clarity of your response, he's left stuck in his own thoughts, going over every possibility with no way out. Overthinking in this way can also create an emotional distance. Instead of the two of you coming together to solve the issue, the silence and his internal thoughts start to create an invisible wall between you. He's consumed with doubt, and it might take some time before he's ready to open up or talk through the situation. He may even start to withdraw, convinced that his actions haven't been enough to earn your attention or affection. The more he feels like he can't figure it out, the more emotionally distant he becomes, creating a sense of isolation that's hard to overcome without direct communication. Ultimately, the cycle of overthinking will only stop when the silence is broken. A man can only take so much of trying to figure out what's going on without understanding the bigger picture. He'll reach a point where he either takes action to get the conversation going again or falls back into his own insecurities, wondering if it's even worth trying to understand what's going on anymore. Overthinking is a natural response to silence, but it's not the most productive one. It's driven by fear and uncertainty, and the only way to break it is by opening up and having a direct conversation about what's truly happening. Until then, the confusion and self-doubt will continue to build, leaving him trapped in his own mind, searching for answers that he may not find without your help. When a woman goes silent, a man often feels a deep sense of uncertainty. The uncertainty comes from not knowing where things stand in the relationship. The silent treatment can leave him questioning the very foundation of what he thought was a stable connection. At first, he might try to ignore the silence, convincing himself it's just a phase, or that maybe you're busy. However, as the silence continues, the reality starts to sink in. Something has changed, and he doesn't know what it is. The longer the silence lasts, the more he becomes consumed with the thought of whether or not he's losing you. He starts to wonder if the relationship is at its breaking point. This uncertainty is rooted in a natural fear of loss. The silence forces him to confront his own vulnerability. He doesn't want to admit it, but the truth is, he's afraid. Men may not always show their emotions openly, but inside they're feeling the weight of uncertainty. They might start to question their actions and the things they may have done to contribute to the change. He wants to know if there's a chance to fix things or if it's too late. What makes this uncertainty even more intense is that men often struggle to express their emotions the same way women do. When a woman goes silent, he doesn't know how to process that emotionally. Most men are not conditioned to deal with emotional distance in the same way women are, and so they resort to overthinking and trying to figure out why things aren't the way they used to be. His mind races through different scenarios, from wondering if he did something wrong to questioning if he's simply not enough. Every possible reason for the silence enters his mind, and he doesn't know which one, if any, is true. This fear of the unknown keeps him on edge, and the longer the silence continues, the more his mind feeds into that fear. In the face of this uncertainty, his first response is often to try and fix it, whether that's by reaching out more, overcompensating with gestures, or desperately trying to do whatever he thinks might bring you back to him. However, these efforts usually stem from his need to resolve the emotional discomfort caused by the silence rather than a clear understanding of what you need. He starts sending texts, calling, or attempting to engage in conversation, hoping that by doing so, the silence will be broken and the confusion will end. However, without knowing exactly what's happening on your end, he risks coming off as desperate or intrusive, which only adds to the complexity of the situation. While he's caught in this whirlwind of emotions, his sense of uncertainty starts to create emotional distance between him and the relationship. The fear of not knowing how you feel and not being able to get a straight answer from you makes him hesitant. He might start to retreat emotionally, pulling back from the relationship in an attempt to protect himself from further hurt. This emotional withdrawal is not an act of indifference. Rather, it's a defense mechanism. He's trying to shield himself from the pain of loss, but in doing so, he ends up creating the very distance that he fears. This uncertainty can also lead him to question the stability of the relationship as a whole. The absence of communication triggers thoughts about whether the relationship is worth fighting for or if it's simply coming to an end. He may begin to doubt his own commitment to the relationship, wondering if his efforts have been enough or if he's been taking things for granted. The uncertainty becomes a breeding ground for insecurity, and he might start feeling like he's not good enough or that he's failing in his role in the relationship. He might even look for external validation or distractions to cope with the feelings of inadequacy that the silence brings. On the flip side, while uncertainty can make him feel distant and confused, it can also spark an awareness of how much he truly values the relationship. When faced with the possibility of losing you, he might start to realize just how much he cares about you and the relationship. The silence forces him to take a step back and reflect on what he's willing to do to fix things. His feelings for you become more apparent, and it becomes clearer to him how much he doesn't want to lose what you've built together. The uncertainty, though painful, can lead to an emotional awakening, a realization of just how deeply he feels for you. However, this realization doesn't always lead to immediate clarity or action. The uncertainty can leave him in a state of paralysis, unsure of what to do next. He may struggle to find the right words or the right approach to break the silence. The longer he stays in this emotional fog, the more frustrated he becomes with himself for not knowing how to fix things. He might try harder to make you talk, but without the right understanding, his actions could be seen as impatience or desperation. In conclusion, when a woman goes silent, a man experiences a mix of confusion, fear, and uncertainty. His first instinct is to figure out what went wrong, but this only leads to overthinking and emotional distance. The silence forces him to confront his vulnerabilities and can create a deep sense of insecurity. As time passes, he may realize just how much he values the relationship, but the uncertainty of not knowing where things stand can lead to frustration and emotional withdrawal. until the silence is broken. He's left trying to navigate through the fog, seeking clarity and a way back to the emotional connection he once had. The silence is powerful. It forces him to reflect, to question, and to ultimately come face to face with his own fears and feelings. When a woman goes silent, a man begins to feel a certain kind of urgency, a need to fix whatever has caused this distance. The silence, though seemingly peaceful on the surface, often carries a deeper weight. It's not just about the absence of words, it's about the unspoken emotional gap that forms in its place. He begins to wonder if this silence is a result of something he did or something he failed to do. He might not express it outwardly, but deep down, he's panicking. The need to know what's wrong, what caused the shift in the relationship, becomes overwhelming. He might try to reach out to you, sending a text or making a phone call, hoping for some sort of response that will break the silence. The problem is, the more he tries, the more it feels like he's not getting any closer to understanding what's happening. Instead of feeling relieved by your response, he often finds himself feeling even more frustrated because the silence remains, even if it's now accompanied by his own voice asking questions that don't seem to have answers. This sense of urgency can lead him to make hasty decisions or react impulsively. He might show up at your door uninvited or bombard you with messages, trying to make sense of the situation. He's searching for closure, but what he doesn't realize is that in his desperation, he's only making the situation more complicated. The urgency to get answers might make him act out of character, which can lead to more misunderstandings and tension between the two of you. He might even begin to second-guess himself, wondering if his actions are only pushing you further away. In his mind, he feels the pressure to get things back to normal, and the longer the silence persists, the more pressure he feels. This urgency can also lead him to feel like he's losing control of the relationship. In a situation where communication is key, the silence feels like the opposite. It's a lack of control. He's no longer able to gauge where you stand emotionally or what your thoughts are. He might start to feel that the dynamics of the relationship have shifted in a way that he can't understand, and this loss of control leaves him feeling vulnerable. A man, especially one who values certainty, often finds comfort in knowing where he stands with the people he cares about. When that certainty disappears, it creates an emotional chaos that he doesn't know how to handle. The silence throws him off balance, and as much as he might try to hide it, he feels disoriented and powerless. At this point, his need to fix things becomes more about himself than the relationship. He starts to act out of a deep sense of anxiety. He might convince himself that if he just keeps pushing, the silence will end and everything will go back to how it was. But this is where he's missing the point. What he doesn't realize is that your silence isn't a simple problem to fix, it's a communication breakdown. His desperation to restore normalcy might prevent him from recognizing that what you need is not just words or actions, but an understanding of what's causing the silence. The urgency to solve the problem without fully grasping the underlying issue can lead him down the wrong path. This urgency can also lead him to misinterpret your silence. He might view it as a sign of rejection, thinking that you've lost interest or that the relationship is slipping away. His mind becomes filled with worst-case scenarios. He might think that you've already mentally checked out of the relationship, and the silence is just the first step before a breakup or emotional distance. The urgency to fix this growing distance often clouds his judgment, and he might become fixated on trying to change the situation, even if it's not something that can be solved immediately. What he fails to recognize is that the silence could be a result of his own behavior or the dynamics of the relationship rather than a sign of your loss of affection. But in his urgency, he interprets it as something personal, which only heightens his fear. In his rush to fix the situation, a man might also neglect the importance of giving space. Often the silence is a way for the woman to process her emotions or take a step back to reflect on the relationship. Instead of allowing this space, the man's urge to restore communication might make things worse. He might send constant messages or ask pointed questions, only to find that it pushes you further away. The constant pressure for a response can feel like a violation of the space that's needed for healing or reflection. In his urgency, he forgets that silence, in some cases, is a form of self-preservation or a request for time to think. What he also fails to realize is that this urgency and overactive desire to fix things can lead to him missing the bigger picture. If the silence is due to unresolved issues or emotions, no amount of rushing will resolve the underlying cause. His need for immediate answers or for things to return to normal can blind him to the fact that a more patient, thoughtful approach might be necessary. The problem isn't going to be solved simply by forcing a conversation. It's about allowing time for reflection, for communication to flow naturally, and for both partners to come to a deeper understanding of what's going on beneath the surface. In the end, the urgency a man feels when a woman goes silent is a reflection of his desire for stability and certainty in the relationship. However, that urgency can often work against him. His instinct to fix the situation without fully understanding it can lead to more confusion, frustration, and emotional distance. Instead of forcing the issue, he would be better served by taking a step back and allowing space for both of you to process your feelings. The urgency to fix everything immediately can cloud his ability to see the true source of the silence and can ultimately make it harder to find a real solution. In the end, understanding and patience are often far more effective than hasty actions driven by anxiety. When a woman goes silent, a man is often left to confront his own insecurities, which can manifest in many ways. He may start to doubt himself, questioning if he's done something wrong or if he's simply not measuring up. The silence, though it may appear like a simple withdrawal, triggers something deeper within him. It's not just the absence of communication, but the emotional distance that creates uncertainty. A man who cares about a woman does not want to lose her, and the silence forces him to face the very real possibility that he might be on the verge of losing something that was once a source of comfort, stability, and happiness. This uncertainty causes a ripple effect, making him more self-conscious about his actions, his behavior, and even his worth. The silence feels like a mirror that reflects back all his fears about not being enough, not being capable of meeting her needs, or not being able to live up to her expectations. These thoughts spiral in his mind, often exaggerating his insecurities. He begins to wonder if his flaws have finally caught up with him, or if the things that were once overlooked are now impossible to ignore. His confidence, which was once steady, begins to waver because the silence doesn't give him the answers he needs. Instead, it leaves him with more questions that only fuel his self-doubt. This internal struggle is often not something he will readily share. Men are taught to hide their vulnerabilities, to keep their emotions in check, and to remain strong, but the silence exposes his fears in a way that's hard to ignore. The fear of losing the woman he cares about can push him into an emotional spiral, causing him to replay every interaction, every conversation, every moment of the relationship, trying to figure out where things went wrong. He may think back to a comment he made or an action he took, wondering if those things were the cause of her withdrawal. The truth is, he might never know exactly what triggered her silence, but in his mind, the possibility of losing her becomes more real with every passing moment. The silence amplifies his anxiety, creating a sense of urgency to fix things without knowing exactly how. At the same time, his fears of inadequacy might push him to take action, but often the actions he takes are based on his own insecurities rather than a true understanding of the situation. He might start to overcompensate, showering her with attention or gifts, hoping that these efforts will erase the silence. In reality, these attempts are often misplaced. They're not a solution to the underlying issue, but rather a reflection of his desperation to feel secure in the relationship again. He might send texts, make calls, or show up unexpectedly, hoping that by doing something, he can get back the connection he once had. However, these efforts often do more harm than good. They create pressure, making her feel like she's being pushed to respond before she's ready. The very act of trying to fill the silence can make it worse because it adds an emotional weight that wasn't there before. As the silence continues, his insecurities evolve into feelings of frustration. He begins to feel powerless in the situation. He's tried everything he knows to get her to open up, but nothing seems to work. This frustration starts to build, and he may feel like he's hitting a wall. The more he tries to fix the situation, the more he realizes that there's nothing he can do to control how she feels. This loss of control is often the hardest part for him to handle. Men like to feel in control, whether it's of their own emotions, their environment, or their relationships. The silence forces him to confront the reality that there are some things he cannot control, and this feeling of helplessness can be disorienting. But despite this frustration, there is also a sense of vulnerability that begins to emerge. The longer the silence lingers, the more open he becomes to the idea that perhaps he hasn't been the best partner. His own insecurities, which were once hidden behind bravado or confidence, now surface in a raw and unfiltered way. He starts to recognize that there might be aspects of himself or the relationship that need to change. The silence, though painful, forces him to confront his own shortcomings. He might not admit it outright, but he begins to question what he could have done differently to avoid this situation. And in this moment, he may also start to realize that change is not only about making things right with her, but also about becoming a better version of himself. In many cases, the silence forces a man to recognize the importance of emotional intelligence in a relationship. He may come to the realization that actions speak louder than words, and that his behavior toward her or his lack of emotional awareness might have contributed to the distance. It's a humbling experience for him, as he understands that relationships require more than just superficial gestures or physical affection. They require emotional depth, empathy, and the ability to communicate openly. The silence forces him to reflect on whether he's truly been present in the relationship and whether he's been attuned to her needs, both spoken and unspoken. This realization doesn't come easily, but it's a powerful one. It's an awakening to the fact that silence isn't always a punishment. It's often a call for deeper understanding, growth, and connection. Ultimately, when a woman goes silent, a man is faced with a mirror of his own insecurities, fears, and shortcomings. The silence forces him to confront the vulnerability that he's been avoiding, and it triggers a deeper reflection on the relationship itself. In the process, he may come to understand more about himself and what he needs to change to create a healthier, more balanced connection. The silence is not just an absence of words, it's an opportunity for growth, self-awareness, and emotional maturation. Though it's uncomfortable and often frustrating, it's also a catalyst for change, both within the man and within the relationship. When a woman goes silent, it can be a wake-up call that shakes a man at his core. Over time, men get used to the presence of the woman in their lives. They get used to her texts, her voice, her laughter, her energy. They get comfortable, sometimes too comfortable, believing that no matter how careless they might be, she'll always be there. But silence, that's different. Silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the presence of change. And once a man realizes that the silence is not about playing games, but about her peace, her boundaries, and her decision to stop chasing validation, it hits differently. It's then he sees that she's not waiting for him to change, she's already changed herself. This realization doesn't come easily. At first, he might think she's just mad, maybe even trying to manipulate him or make a point. He might say to himself, she'll come around, or she's just being emotional. But as the silence stretches on and he sees her living, laughing, healing, and moving forward without him, something clicks in his brain. He starts to see her not as the woman who needed him, but the woman who outgrew him. And that truth, it stings, because now he's not just dealing with her absence. He's dealing with the realization that she no longer seeks his presence. In this silence, he is forced to see her value clearly. While she was talking, explaining, complaining, or even crying, he might have taken her for granted. He might have tuned her out, rolled his eyes, or brushed it off. But now, with no words left to hear, he's left replaying all those moments in his head, all the things she tried to tell him, all the ways she tried to reach him, and all the chances she gave him. Now they come back in full color. It's like the silence becomes a movie reel in his mind, showing him everything he missed when he thought she'd never leave. And while he sits with those thoughts, he sees something he never expected: her glow. Her energy begins to shift, and she starts to move in the world like someone who's done being broken. She's not calling, not texting, not reacting to his posts or stories. She's not asking questions or demanding explanations. That peaceful silence says, I've said all I needed to say. It carries a power that no argument ever could. And that's when he realizes he's not in control anymore. This shift in power is hard for many men to handle. When a woman stops chasing, when she stops explaining, and when she stops fighting for the relationship, she regains her dignity. And a dignified woman walking away in silence is one of the strongest messages a man can receive. It makes him look in the mirror and ask himself, how did I let her slip away? It forces him to reflect on his own emotional immaturity, his lack of communication, or his failure to appreciate her when he had the chance. The silence becomes a teacher. It teaches him the value of peace. It teaches him that not every woman will stick around while he figures himself out. It teaches him that emotional security is not something he can buy or fake. It's something he has to build through consistency, respect, and effort. And if he didn't do that, then the silence is her way of saying, I refuse to keep investing in someone who doesn't value me. By the time he wakes up to all of this, it's often too late. Because once a woman finds peace, once she finds herself, once she realizes she doesn't need him to be happy, she won't go back to the version of herself that tolerated less. And even if he comes back with promises and apologies, even if he begs or tries to remind her of the good times, it won't land the same, because the silence already taught her the most important lesson: she is enough on her own. In the end, a man who sees a woman go silent and watches her heal will be faced with a truth that no words could have delivered. Her silence was not rejection. It was a revolution, a quiet, strong stand for self-respect. And the biggest mistake he made wasn't losing her. It was realizing too late that her silence wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of her freedom.